BV, UTIs, and vaginal yeast issues, they all kind of feel similar, right? UTI is going to be more on pain on urination. BV, you'll tend to have more of an odor, more of that fishy odor from the potassium hydroxide. But usually with Candida, you may get a little discharge. You may get a little bit of like a brewery smell, that kind of yeasty smell, but typically not as overt as the BV. The BV is more caused by bacteria, the Gardnerella bacteria, where Candida is caused by Candida. Yeast overgrowth is caused by Candida. And so just got to differentiate the two. So if we see that, that's important to know, and that can tell us that we're driving Candida with the hormones being too high, that's shifting the pH. Now, I find low stomach acid is a big thing. Just like the vaginal canal is impacted by birth control, well, so can the stomach be. If you're not making enough stomach acid, like I mentioned, acid is going to have a natural antimicrobial-like effect. And so if we have low stomach acid, not enough stomach acid, that potentially impacts the intestinal tract to have an overgrowth. Acids provide a natural antimicrobial environment. So if we have low stomach acid, it's a good chance that we're not breaking down our food, number one. There's potentially more fermentation can happen because we're not breaking that down, so the microbes in the gut can start to eat it more. And then we have low stomach acid, so then we're not breaking down all the proteins, the fats, and the carbohydrates. And then that's that pH being higher is going to make it easier for the microbes to grow. I would also say bile acids are going to impact it as well, because bile acids are also antimicrobial. So anytime you lower the acids, whether it's bile, whether it's stomach acid, whether it's proteolytic enzymes, you're going to have more of this food sitting in your stomach. It's going to be fermenting, rancidifying, and putrefying, and it is more likely to be a breeding ground for Candida, especially if there's more carbohydrate and more processed carbohydrate as well. So you have your carbs like fruit and starch, and then your processed carbs, which are like your flours and your sugar. All right, so next, if you're on any steroids, any chemotherapy, these are going to be things that are going to weaken your immune system, and that can make it very easy for Candida to grow. Things like steroids like prednisone or corticosteroids or cortisone, that's going to mobilize a lot of glucose as well, and Candida loves to feed on glucose. So if you're mobilizing lots of glucose, everyone, you're providing a lot more fuel for that Candida to grow. So you can weaken your immune system with chemotherapy drugs. That's why, like, if you saw, like in the AIDS epidemic in the 80s, one of the biggest ways an AIDS patient would pass on would be from Candida overgrowth, from chronic candidiasis. And that was because their immune system was being knocked down by a virus and also being knocked down by a lot of medication. And so it really made that microbial imbalance a lot more pronounced. So good to look at that. So we have the steroids as well. Now, if you're eating lots of carbohydrate, we hit that with steroids. We talked about the medications. We talked about birth control and hormones. I would just say being under a lot of stress, right? If you're under a lot of stress, just like you're adding cortisone or prednisone, if you have like a lot of inflammation, let's say your elbows hurt, a doctor may recommend steroids, but what if you're just chronically stressed? Could chronic stress cause this surge of cortisol, and could that be enough to create Candida? Yes, I would say for sure. Partly because when you're mobilizing, the stress response is cortisol, adrenaline, that mobilizes glucose. Why? So you can grab that glucose, you can run, fight, and flee. That makes sense from an evolutionary standpoint. You want to get away from the tiger, that's what you do. But what if you're creating that stress response and then you're not burning the sugar up because you're sitting down and you're sedentary? Well, now you have this extra glucose in your bloodstream from this stress response. So could that be extra fuel for Candida? Hypothetically, yes, I think so.